My parents sued me for unjust enrichment because I refused to liquidate my retirement fund to save my brother's failing business. They claimed my childhood was an investment I had to repay. But they forgot I'm a forensic accountant, and I knew exactly where their money was really hiding. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The envelope wasn't heavy, but when it hit my doormat, it felt like it carried the weight of a tombstone. I was lying on the sofa, curled into a tight ball beneath a heated blanket. It had been 4 days since the surgery, a routine appendectomy that had turned complicated due to an infection. My abdomen felt like it was being held together by fire and staples. I hadn't showered in 3 days. My hair was a matted mess, and the painkillers were making the edges of my vision blurry. I wasn't expecting anyone. I certainly wasn't expecting a process server. When the doorbell had rung earlier, I had shuffled to the door, hunched over, clutching my side. The man on the porch didn't look me in the eye. He just asked, "Isabella?" And when I nodded, he shoved the thick manila envelope into my hand and walked away without another word. Now I stared at it. Superior Court of the State of New York. My hands trembled, not just from the residual fever, but from a sudden, icy dread that pierced through the narcotic haze of the medication. I tore the flap open, the paper slicing a tiny cut into my thumb. I didn't even feel the sting. I pulled out the stack of documents, the legal jargon swimming before my eyes until I focused on the names in bold print at the top of the complaint. Plaintiffs Rowan redacted and Victoria redacted. Defendant Isabella redacted. My parents were suing me. I forgot the pain in my stomach. I forgot the infection. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I scanned the paragraphs, my eyes darting frantically over the words. Phrases jumped out at me, aggressive and absurd. Failure to provide familial support. Breach of implied contract. And then, the term that made the room spin, unjust enrichment. I dropped the papers onto the coffee table as if they were burning my skin. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the pounding of my own heart in my ears. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling over the screen. I saw 3 missed calls from my mother, Victoria. No voicemails, just missed calls as if she were checking to see if the bomb had detonated yet. I didn't call her back. I couldn't. Instead, I stared at the wall, the betrayal washing over me in a cold, suffocating wave. I had just come out of surgery. They knew that. I had texted them from the recovery room, telling them I was scared, that I was in pain. They hadn't visited. They hadn't sent flowers. Instead, they had sent a lawsuit. The room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. I read the final line of the summary again, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from the fever. They were demanding a sum that was almost exactly the amount of my entire savings and $401K combined. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It wasn't just a lawsuit, it was an eviction notice from my own family. The silence of the house, usually my sanctuary, transformed into a prison. I sat there for hours, the sunlight shifting across the floorboards, unable to move. Every time I looked at the papers, a fresh wave of nausea rolled through me. Unjust enrichment. I whispered the words aloud, testing their weight. In the legal world, my world, where I worked as a forensic accountant, that term usually applied to business partners who stole trade secrets or contractors who took payment without doing the work. It meant someone had profited unfairly at another's expense. My parents were claiming that by raising me, by feeding me, clothing me, and housing me until I was 18, they had enriched me, and now that I was successful, they were entitled to a return on that investment. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Luke. "Mom says you got the papers. Don't be dramatic, Bella. Just sign the settlement agreement and we can drop the court thing. I really need the capital by Friday." I stared at the screen, reading the message over and over until the pixels blurred. Don't be dramatic. capital by Friday. He spoke about my life savings, the money I had scraped together through 80-hour work weeks and sleepless nights during tax season, as if it were just a loose piles of cash I was hoarding for no reason. I forced myself to stand up, wincing as the stitches pulled tight against my skin. I needed water. I walked to the kitchen, filling a glass with shaking hands. I drank it down, trying to cool the burning in my chest. I remembered the last time I saw them 2 weeks ago. It was a Sunday dinner. I had been feeling the early twinges of appendicitis then, though I ignored it. Luke had been there, pacing the dining room, talking about his new venture, a luxury lifestyle consulting firm. He needed $100,000 for branding and initial overhead. I had told him no, gently at first, then firmly. Rowan, my father, had sat at the head of the table, cutting his steak with precise, surgical strokes. "Isabella," he had said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm, "you have the liquidity. Your brother has the vision. It's the duty of the strong to support the family." "It's not liquidity, Dad," I had argued. "It's my retirement. It's my emergency fund. I'm not an ATM." Victoria had just sipped her wine, looking at me with that disappointed, glossy stare she had perfected over 3 decades. "You've always been so selfish with your success, Isabella. We thought we raised you better." I hadn't realized then that the dinner wasn't a request. It was a final warning. I walked back to the living room and picked up the lawsuit again. I flipped to the section detailing their damages. They had itemized my childhood. Piano lessons, 1998-2004, $12,000. Orthodontics, 2001-2003, $6,500. Room and board, estimated market value, $150,000. They were trying to invoice me for my existence. A dark, cold laugh bubbled up in my throat. It hurt to laugh, but I couldn't stop. They thought this would break me. They thought the shock of the lawsuit, combined with my physical weakness, would force me to write the check just to make the pain go away. They were counting on my fear. They were counting on the fact that I had always been the dutiful daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who cleaned up the messes. But as I looked at the financial addendum attached to the lawsuit, a sloppy estimation of my net worth that Luke had clearly guessed at, my forensic brain kicked into gear. The numbers were wrong. They were underestimating my assets in some areas and wildly overestimating them in others. But more importantly, looking at their filings, I noticed something else. To claim hardship and justify their demand for support, they had to disclose their own financial standing. I scanned the summary of their assets. Real estate holdings, $0, primary residence transferred to trust. Liquid assets, $5,000. I frowned. That wasn't right. I knew for a fact that Rowan had sold a commercial property 3 years ago for nearly $2 million. I had helped him set up the initial tax structure for the sale before he fired me and hired a cheaper guy. Where was that money? I dragged myself over to my laptop. The pain in my side was now a dull, throbbing rhythm, a war drum beating a call to arms. I opened my secure work server. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a senior forensic accountant for one of the top firms in the city. Tracing hidden assets wasn't just my job, it was my art form. They had thrown the first punch while I was bleeding on the ground. They wanted a legal battle? Fine. They had forgotten one crucial thing. You don't sue the person who knows where the bodies are buried, especially when that person knows how to read the map. To understand why my parents would sue their own daughter while she was recovering from surgery, you have to understand the mythology of our family. The mythology was simple. Luke was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets lucky enough to orbit him. From the day Luke was born, 4 years after me, he was the golden child. He was charming, I'll give him that. He had a smile that could melt butter and an ability to lie so convincingly that he often believed it himself. I was the responsible one. I was the one who studied. I was the one who got scholarships because Rowan and Victoria couldn't afford to send 2 kids to college, and they were saving the college fund for Luke. He needs the support, Isabella, my mother had told me when I was 17, holding my acceptance letter to a prestigious state university. You're smart, you'll figure it out. Luke, he's sensitive, he needs a safety net. So I figured it out. I worked 2 jobs. I took out loans. I ate instant noodles for 4 years while Luke drove a brand new convertible to his classes at a private liberal arts college, classes he rarely attended. When Luke flunked out after 3 semesters, it was the professor's fault. When he crashed the convertible, it was the other driver's fault. When his first business, a custom sneaker dropshipping scam, failed and left him $40,000 in debt, it was the market's fault. And every time, Rowan and Victoria were there with the checkbook. Rowan was a man who defined himself by his perceived status. A retired real estate agent who had ridden the housing bubble of the early 2000s, he believed he was a titan of industry. He was obsessed with appearance. He wore suits to the grocery store. He spoke in aphorisms like, "You have to spend money to make money," usually right before losing a significant amount of money. Victoria was his perfect counterpart. She was a woman who viewed motherhood not as raising humans, but as curating a gallery. I was the piece of art that was sturdy and functional, hung in the hallway. Luke was the avant-garde centerpiece, the one she bragged about at her bridge club, spinning his unemployment as taking time to curate his next venture. But the investments in Luke were drying up. I knew Rowan's real estate days were long over. They were living off the principle of their savings, burning through it to keep up the appearance of wealth and to fund Luke's lifestyle. Now Luke was 30. He had decided he was going to be a tech incubator. He didn't know how to code. He didn't have a business plan. He just had a pitch deck he'd made on a free graphic design app and a demand for $150,000. "It's a sure thing, Bella," Luke had said during that disastrous dinner. "I just need the seed round. Mom and Dad are tapped out because of the market, but you're sitting on cash. It's selfish not to help." That was the word they used to weaponize my prudence. Selfish. I looked at the lawsuit again. The unjust enrichment claim wasn't just a legal strategy, it was their worldview manifest. In their eyes, my money was their money. They believed that because they had birthed me, they owned my output. I was a subsidiary of the Parents and Luke Corporation, and I was withholding dividends. The doorbell rang again. This time, I checked the camera on my phone. It was Rowan. He was standing on my porch, looking immaculate in a navy blazer and slacks, checking his watch. He didn't look like a worried father visiting his sick daughter. He looked like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. I struggled to my feet, clutching the wall for support. I shouldn't answer. My lawyer, if I had one yet, would tell me not to answer. But the anger was overriding the pain now. I wanted to see his face. I opened the door. I didn't unlock the storm door, though. I kept the glass barrier between us. "Isabella," he said, his voice projecting that practiced, booming warmth. "We were worried. You didn't answer your mother's calls." "I was served with a lawsuit, Dad," I said, my voice raspy. "I assumed communication should go through counsel." Rowan sighed, a theatrical puff of air, and shook his head as if I were a toddler refusing to eat her peas. "Don't be like that. The lawyers are just a formality, a way to structure the transaction. We need to handle this as a family." "A transaction?" I leaned my forehead against the cool glass. "You're suing me for the cost of my piano lessons." "We're asking for a return on our investment so we can help your brother," Rowan corrected, his eyes hardening slightly. "Luke is in trouble, Isabella, real trouble, this business. He promised investors. If he doesn't pay them back, there could be complications, legal ones. So you want me to pay for his fraud?" "It's not fraud," Rowan snapped, his composure cracking. "It's a bridge loan. Look, just sign the settlement. We drop the suit, you transfer the funds, and we all move on. You have plenty. Why are you hoarding it? Do you want to see your brother go to jail?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He wasn't just trying to fund a business. He was terrified. Luke had done something bad, and Rowan and Victoria were broke. They were trying to cannibalize me to feed the beast they had created. "I just had surgery, Dad," I whispered. "I'm in pain." Rowan looked at my midsection, then back at my eyes. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of concern, but then he checked his watch again. "I know, honey. That's why we wanted to make this easy. Just sign the papers. I have them right here in the car. I can notarize them myself." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. He didn't come to check on me. He came because he thought I was weak. He thought the pain meds and the fear would make me compliant. He was a vulture circling a wounded animal. "Go away," I said. "Isabella, be reasonable." "Go away, Rowan," I said, using his first name for the first time in my life. "And tell your lawyer to check his email on Monday, because I'm not just defending this suit, I'm auditing it." I slammed the heavy inner door and locked the deadbolt. My legs gave out, and I slid down to the floor, the wood hard against my back. I was done crying. I was done being the dutiful daughter. They wanted a forensic accounting of our relationship. They were going to get one. The next 3 days were a blur of antibiotic schedules, ice packs, and the glow of 3 monitors illuminating my dark living room. I didn't go back to the office, but I didn't rest either. I couldn't. The anger had calcified into a cold, hard resolve that served as a better killer than the Percocet. My lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Sarah whom I'd worked with on several fraud cases, had been incredulous when I sent her the filing. "Isabella, this is insane," she had said over the phone. "Unjust enrichment for raising a child? No judge in New York will entertain this. It's a nuisance suit. We can get it dismissed." "No," I had replied, adjusting the heating pad against my side. "Don't dismiss it yet. They submitted a sworn financial affidavit claiming poverty to get the filing fees waived and to fast-track the hardship claim. I want to see that affidavit." "Bella, if you let this proceed to discovery, it's going to cost you money," Sarah warned. "It's going to cost them more," I said. "Send me the affidavit, Sarah. I need to see what they told the court they're worth." When the PDF arrived in my inbox, I felt that familiar tingle at the base of my skull. The predator's instinct that kicked in whenever I smelled a cooked book. I opened the file. Rowan and Victoria had listed their total assets at less than $50,000. They claimed their monthly income was solely Social Security and a small pension. They painted a picture of destitute retirees who had given everything to their ungrateful daughter. I cracked my knuckles, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at my stitches. "Okay, Dad, let's see." I logged into a proprietary database used by my firm. It aggregates public records, UCC filings, property deeds, and corporate registrations. I wasn't hacking. I was just connecting dots that most people don't know exist. I started with the house. They claimed the house was in a trust. I pulled the deed history. The R&V Family Trust. Trustees, Rowan and Victoria. Beneficiary, Luke. I wasn't listed. I stared at the screen, a fresh pang of hurt piercing through my professional detachment. They had transferred their primary asset, a house worth $1.2 million, into a trust for Luke 5 years ago. That protected it from creditors, sure, but it also meant they had legally disinherited me half a decade ago without saying a word. But the house wasn't the smoking gun. The commercial property was. Rowan had sold the Grand Avenue building 3 years ago. I pulled the transaction record. Sale price, $2.1 million. The seller wasn't Rowan directly. It was an LLC called Phoenix Rise Holdings. I searched for Phoenix Rise Holdings. It had been dissolved 6 months after the sale. Where did the money go? I traced the registered agent. It was a lawyer in Delaware. Dead end? Not for me. I cross-referenced the address used for the LLC's final tax filing. It matched a P.O. box in the Caymans. "Sloppy, Dad," I whispered. "So sloppy." Rowan thought he was clever. He thought because he moved money offshore, it vanished. But money leaves a wake like a boat in water. I pulled the UCC filings for Luke's failed businesses. There were 3 of them in the last 4 years: Prestige Consults, Luke Tech, and Vanguard Lifestyle. Each of these businesses had received angel investment loans. I looked at the lender names: PR Capital, Phoenix Resources, Rise Ventures. Rowan hadn't just given Luke money. He had funneled the untaxed profits from the building sale through a series of shell companies to lend money to Luke's businesses. This allowed Luke to look like a legitimate entrepreneur with backing, and it allowed Rowan to hide the $2 million from the IRS by claiming it was reinvested in business ventures that conveniently operated at a loss. But here was the catch: the beautiful, jagged trap they had built for themselves. In their lawsuit against me, they claimed they were broke because they spent their savings raising me. In reality, they were broke because they had washed $2 million through their son's incompetence, likely evading capital gains tax in the process. If I presented this evidence to the court, the lawsuit would be the least of their worries. I had enough here to trigger a federal audit that would strip them of everything: the house, the pension, the freedom. I sat back, the light from the screens reflecting in my glasses. I had the leverage. I had the weapon. But I needed them to confirm it. I needed to see the panic in their eyes to know I was right. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. "Set up a settlement conference," I said. "Tell them I'm ready to discuss terms. I want to do it in person. Thursday." "Are you sure you're up for that physically?" Sarah asked. "I'll take extra ibuprofen," I said. "Just make sure Luke is there." The conference room at Sarah's firm was all glass and polished mahogany, designed to intimidate. I arrived 20 minutes early. I wore my best charcoal suit, though the waistband was uncomfortably tight against my healing incisions. I had used concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I looked impeccable. I looked like a shark. When my family arrived, the contrast was staggering. Rowan strode in wearing a suit that was 10 years out. Of style but expensive, a gold watch glinting on his wrist. Victoria was in cashmere, clutching a designer handbag that I knew cost more than my first car. And Luke looked like he was attending a brunch. He wore ripped designer jeans, a blazer over a t-shirt, and sunglasses that he didn't remove until he sat down. They didn't look at me. They looked at the view of the skyline. "Let's make this quick," Luke said, leaning back in the leather chair and putting his feet on the base of the table. "I have a meeting with a developer at 3. "Get your feet down, Luke," I said, my voice low and flat. He smirked, but he moved them. "Feisty, I guess the surgery didn't humble you." Rowan cleared his throat, placing a folder on the table. "We're glad you came to your senses, Isabella. This lawsuit? It's unpleasant business. But fairness is fairness. We calculated the adjusted inflation on the expenses we incurred for you. We're willing to settle for a flat $300,000. That creates a clean break." $300,000. It was almost exactly the amount I had in my brokerage account. Luke must have snooped through my mail years ago or guessed based on my job title. Sarah, my lawyer, opened her mouth to speak, but I silenced her with a raised hand. I needed to do this. "Fairness," I repeated. I looked at Victoria. "Mom, do you agree with this? You think I owe you $300,000 for raising me?" Victoria sighed, adjusting her pearls. Her eyes were wet, a practiced performance of maternal martyrdom. "Bella, you have so much. We're struggling. Your father and I, we gave up everything for you too. Is it so wrong to expect a little help in our twilight years? We're living on a fixed income." "A fixed income," I nodded. "According to your affidavit, you have less than $5,000 in the bank. Is that correct?" "You read the papers," Rowan snapped. "Yes, we are destitute." "And the house?" I asked. "We don't own the house," Rowan said quickly. "It's in a trust." "A trust for Luke," I clarified. "It's a family trust," Luke interjected. "God, you're so greedy. You always counting everyone else's money." "I'm a forensic accountant, Luke. Counting money is literally what I do." I opened my own folder, a slim, black binder. I slid a single sheet of paper across the polished table. It was the incorporation document for Phoenix Rise Holdings. Rowan's face didn't change immediately. He frowned, squinting at the paper. What is this? That is the shell company you used to sell the Grand Avenue property 3 years ago, I said calmly. You sold it for $2.1 million. Rowan froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a curtain dropping. Victoria stopped fidgeting with her pearls. I don't know what you're talking about, Rowan stammered, but his voice lacked its usual boom. That was a business deal. It failed. The money is gone. I know it's gone, I said, sliding a second paper across. This one showed the wire transfers. It's gone because you funneled it into Prestige Consults and Luke Tech. You didn't lose the money, Dad. You gave it to Luke. And worse, you claimed those transfers were business losses to avoid paying the capital gains tax on the sale. That's tax fraud. About $400,000 worth of tax fraud. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the HVAC system seemed to hold its breath. Luke looked between me and the paper, his arrogance faltering. So, it's Dad's money. He can do what he wants. Not if he's suing me for poverty, I said, leaning forward, ignoring the sharp pull of pain in my abdomen. You filed a sworn affidavit to a superior court judge stating you have no assets, but I can prove you had $2 million 3 years ago and that you currently control assets hidden in offshore accounts. That's perjury, Dad. That's jail time. Victoria let out a small, strangled sound. Isabella, you wouldn't. You sued me while I was in the hospital. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound cracking like a whip. You served me papers while I was bleeding, and you did it to fund him. I pointed a shaking finger at Luke. To fund another one of his failures. It's not a failure, Luke shouted, standing up. His face was red. The investigation is going to clear me. The room went deadly quiet again. I looked at Luke. What investigation? Rowan reached out and grabbed Luke's arm, digging his fingers into the fabric of his jacket. Shut up, Luke. Shut up right now. I looked from Luke to Rowan. The panic in Rowan's eyes was primal. This wasn't just about the tax fraud I had found. There was something else. Sit down, I said to Luke, my voice dropping to a whisper. What investigation? We're leaving, Rowan announced, standing up and gathering the papers with trembling hands. This meeting is over. We'll see you in court. If you walk out that door, I said, I send this binder to the RS Criminal Investigation Division and the district attorney. Today. Rowan froze. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw a broken man. But it wasn't the humility of a father asking for help. It was the terror of a criminal caught in the lights. You can't, he hissed. I'm your father. Then tell me the truth, I demanded. Why do you need $300,000 by Friday? The tax fraud is old news. What is happening now? The standoff lasted for a minute, but it felt like an hour. Finally, Victoria broke. She put her head in her hands and began to sob, real, ugly tears this time. They're going to take the house, she wailed. They're going to take everything. Rowan slumped back into his chair. Luke took private loans, not from banks. I turned to my brother. He was looking at the floor, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. Hard money lenders? I asked. It was a bridge loan, Luke snapped, defensive even in his ruin. I was waiting for the Series A funding to come through for the consulting firm. I just needed $50,000 to cover the lease on the office space and the car. The interest rates were high. How high? I asked. Weekly, Rowan whispered. It compounded weekly. I closed my eyes. How much does he owe? $280,000, Rowan said. They gave us until Friday. If we don't pay, they execute a lien on the house. The trust doesn't protect against criminal liens or the kind of people who collect these debts. Wait, I said, my brain racing. If the house is in a trust, they can't lien it unless the trustee signed the guarantee. Rowan didn't answer. He looked at the wall. You signed the house as collateral for a loan shark? I asked, incredulous. He said he had investors lined up, Rowan yelled, pointing at Luke. He showed me the emails, It was a sure thing. We were just helping him bridge the gap. The emails were fake, I realized. I looked at Luke. You forged investor interest to get Mom and Dad to sign over their house. Luke shrugged, a gesture so casual it made me want to scream. I didn't forge them. I projected them. It's visualization. I was manifesting the deal. You committed fraud against your own parents, I said. And when the bill came due, you three decided the solution was to sue me. We didn't have a choice, Victoria sobbed. We couldn't let him get hurt. These people. They threatened him, Isabella. They came to the house. So you decided to sacrifice me, I said. You decided to take my retirement, my safety, to pay off the thugs your golden child invited into your lives. You have the money, Luke shouted. Why are you making this such a big deal? You sit on that cash and do nothing with it. I'm trying to build an empire. I'm trying to create a legacy for this family. You're a parasite, Luke, I said coldly. And you're a dried-up jealous. Enough, Rowan barked. He looked at me. Isabella, please, if we don't pay by Friday, we lose the house. We end up on the street. Is that what you want? To see your mother homeless? Just sign the settlement. We'll pay you back when the market turns. When the market turns, I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. You're delusional. I stood up. The pain in my side was screaming now, a hot iron against my ribs, but my mind was crystal clear. Here is what is going to happen, I said. I am not giving you a dime, not today, not Friday, not ever. Then we proceed with the suit, Rowan threatened, though his voice shook. We will drag your name through the mud. We'll tell your firm you abandoned your sick parents. We'll. Do it, I challenged. Because the moment you file one more motion, I send this binder to the IRS. And not just the IRS. I'll send it to the investors you lied to, Luke. I wonder how they'll feel knowing you committed tax fraud while claiming you couldn't pay them. You're bluffing, Luke sneered. Try me. I walked out of the conference room. I made it to the elevator before my legs gave out. Sarah caught me, holding me up as the doors closed, shielding me from the view of my family. You okay? She asked, concerned. No, I said, leaning against the metal wall, but I have what I need. I went home, but the victory felt hollow. I knew they weren't done. Desperate people do desperate things, and my family was drowning. That night, the attack started. It began with an email to the HR department of my firm. My boss forwarded it to me at 9:00 p.m. It was a rambling, incoherent complaint from an concerned citizen, claiming I was embezzling client funds and using my accounting skills to hide personal assets. It was obviously written by Luke. It used the word utilization 3 times in one sentence. Then came the social media posts. Luke posted a video on his Instagram story, teary-eyed, claiming his wealthy sister was letting their parents starve. He tagged my employer. He tagged local news stations. But the inal straw came the next morning. I woke up to a notification from my bank. Alert, attempted access. Someone had tried to reset the password to my main brokerage account. They had the correct username and my social security number. They had failed the 2-factor authentication. The IP address was local. It was from my parents' house. They weren't just suing me anymore. They were trying to rob me. I sat at my kitchen table, the coffee going cold in front of me. I had the evidence of the tax fraud. I had the leverage. But I realized that a private settlement wouldn't stop them. As long as they thought they could bully me, they would keep coming. They needed a public lesson. I looked at the calendar. Friday was the deadline for the loan sharks. It was also the day of my nephew's christening, Luke's son from a brief relationship. The whole extended family would be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the audience Rowan and Victoria performed for. They wanted to play the family card. They wanted to make this about public perception. Fine. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the foreclosure clerk at the county recorder's office. Then, I called the lawyer representing the hard money lender. I had some information they would find very interesting regarding the collateral on their loan. I wasn't just going to win the lawsuit. I was going to dismantle the mythology of the golden child, and I was going to do it while everyone was watching. Friday arrived with a slate-gray sky that matched the grim determination in my gut. It was the day of the deadline for the loan sharks. It was also the day of my nephew's christening. My parents had insisted on holding the reception at the local country club, a venue they had maintained a membership to strictly for appearances, even as their actual bank accounts withered. It was the perfect stage. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tablecloths, and an audience of extended family members who had been fed a steady diet of lies about me for the last week. I walked in 20 minutes late. I was wearing a cream-colored dress that hid the surgical bandage, matched with a structured blazer. I didn't look like the villain they had painted. I didn't look like the greedy, abandoning daughter. I looked like exactly what I was, the only person in the room who had their life together. As I entered the ballroom, the hum of conversation died down. Heads turned. I saw my Aunt Carol whisper something to my cousin, shielding her mouth with a manicured hand. I saw the looks, a mixture of judgment and pity. Luke had done his job well. They all thought I was letting my destitute parents starve while I sat on a dragon's hoard of gold. Rowan and Victoria were standing near the head table, holding court. When they saw me, Victoria stiffened. Rowan's face went a shade of pale that clashed with his spray tan. They hadn't expected me to show. They thought the threat of the IRS or the shame of the smear campaign would keep me hiding at home. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter and walked straight toward them. Isabella, Victoria hissed as I got close, a forced smile plastered on her face for the benefit of the guests. We didn't think you'd come, not after everything. I wouldn't miss it, Mom, I said, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the nearby tables. I wanted to see the family. It's been a while since we had an honest conversation. Luke appeared at my elbow, smelling of expensive cologne and fear. What are you doing here? If you're not here to write the check, get out. You're upsetting Mom. Actually, Luke, I am here to settle accounts, I said. I stepped back, creating a small circle of space. The room was quiet now. The tension was palpable, a physical weight in the air. Aunt Carol, I called out. My aunt, a gossipy woman who loved drama, looked up, startled. You sent me a text yesterday saying I should be ashamed for not helping my parents when they're penniless. Is that right? Well, Carol stammered, clutching her pearls. Isabella, really, this isn't the time. It is exactly the time, I said. I turned back to Rowan and Victoria. Because everyone here thinks I'm being sued because I'm selfish, but they don't know the real reason you sued me, do they, Dad? Isabella, stop, Rowan warned, his voice shaking. Don't do this. I reached into my bag and pulled out the black binder. I didn't hand it to them. I held it up. My parents sued me for unjust enrichment, I announced to the room. They claimed they spent their life savings raising me and that I owed them a refund. They told the court they have zero assets. They told you, I gestured to the room, that they are broke. I opened the binder. But here is a transfer record from the Cayman Islands, I read, my voice steady and cold. 3 years ago, Rowan and Victoria sold the Grand Avenue commercial building for $2.1 million. They didn't pay Zess on it. Instead, they hid it in offshore accounts to fund Luke's businesses. A gasp rippled through the room. I saw my Uncle Mike, a tax attorney, squinting at me, his interest piqued. That's a lie, Luke shouted. She's lying, she's mentally unstable. It's the medication from the surgery. Is it? I pulled out the next document. This is the affidavit from the loan shark you borrowed $280,000 from, Luke. The one you signed using the house that belongs to the trust, as collateral. I looked at Victoria. You didn't sue me because you were poor, Mom. You sued me because you needed quick cash to pay off the criminals Luke got involved with. You tried to rob your daughter to pay for your son's mistakes. Again. Get her out of here, Rowan yelled, looking around for security. She's making a scene. But nobody moved. The family was frozen, caught between the horror of the accusation and the sheer detail of the evidence. I'm not done, I said. Because you dragged my reputation through the mud, I decided to clear the air completely. You see, the deadline for that loan was today. Noon, actually. I checked my watch. It's 12:15. As if on cue, though in reality, it was just the inevitable machinery of the law catching up. The double doors of the ballroom opened. It wasn't the police, it was worse. Two men in cheap suits walked in. One held a clipboard, the other held a stack of notices. They weren't looking for the buffet, they were looking for Rowan. Rowan redacted, the lead man asked, his voice booming in the silent room. Rowan shrank back. Who are you? Process server, the man said, bored, and representative for Apex Capital Lending. We have a default judgment and an order of possession for the property located at parent's address. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. He shoved the papers into Rowan's chest. And, the man added, looking at a second paper, I have a summons for Luke redacted for fraud and theft by deception. The silence in the room was shattered by Victoria's wail. She collapsed into a chair, knocking over a flute of champagne. The glass shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You did this, Luke screamed at me, his face purple. You called them, you tipped them off. I didn't have to call them, Luke, I said, my voice calm amidst the chaos. You signed the contract. You missed the payment. I just made sure the IRS knew about the $2 million in the Caymans so they could freeze the rest of the assets before you gave that to the loan sharks too. I looked at the extended family, who were now staring at Rowan and Victoria with expressions of horror and disgust. The facade was gone. The perfect family was revealed to be a hollow shell of fraud and favoritism. I won't be funding the bailout, I said to Rowan, who was staring at the eviction notice in his hands shaking uncontrollably. I'm the unjust enrichment, remember? I'm the investment that didn't pay out. I turned on my heel. My side ached, my head pounded, but my heart felt lighter than it had in 20 years. Enjoy the reception, I said. And I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of the castle they had built on sand. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely public. By Monday, the unjust enrichment lawsuit against me had been voluntarily dismissed. Sarah, my lawyer, called me with the news, laughing in disbelief. Their lawyer withdrew. He said he couldn't represent them due to a conflict of interest, which is legal speak for, I found out my clients are committing active criminal fraud. I didn't laugh, I just felt a quiet, profound relief. Rowan and Victoria were evicted from the house on Sunday. I heard from Aunt Carol, who was suddenly very eager to apologize and bridge the gap, that the scene was chaotic. The lenders took everything that wasn't personal clothing. The furniture, the art, the piano I had learned to play on, it was all seized to cover the interest on Luke's debt. Because I had tipped off the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the remaining funds in the Cayman accounts were frozen immediately. Rowan and Victoria weren't just homeless. They were facing a federal audit that would likely take years and cost them whatever legitimate retirement savings they had left. Luke didn't fare any better. The investors he had lied to weren't the forgiving type, but the district attorney was even less so. With the evidence I provided regarding his falsified loan applications and the embezzlement of the trust funds, he was indicted on 3 counts of wire fraud. He was currently out on bail, staying on a friend's couch, awaiting a trial that would almost certainly end in prison time. As for me, I took a month of leave from work. I didn't go on a lavish vacation. I stayed home, I healed. I spent the mornings sitting on my back porch, drinking coffee, listening to the birds, and feeling the strange sensation of silence. For my entire life, there had been a background noise of anxiety, the pressure to please them, the fear of their judgment, the need to protect myself from Luke's chaos. Now it was gone. I received a letter from Victoria about 3 weeks after the christening. It was handwritten, sent to my office because I had blocked their numbers and emails. It wasn't an apology. Isabella, I hope you're happy. We are staying in a motel. Your father's blood pressure is dangerous. How could you do this to your own flesh and blood? We only wanted what was best for the family. You have so much, and you destroyed us for nothing." I read it twice. Then I took out a lighter and burned it in my kitchen sink. They still didn't get it. They thought I had destroyed them. They couldn't see that they had destroyed themselves. I had just turned on the lights so everyone could see the wreckage. I used my forensic skills one last time to ensure my own financial fortress was impenetrable. I set up new trusts, changed every password, and retained a permanent restraining order against Luke, citing his threats and the attempted bank access. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was Uncle Mike. "Bella," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "I just wanted to say, I looked over the documents you showed at the party. You were right about all of it. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." "Thanks, Uncle Mike," I said. "Your aunt and I are having a barbecue next weekend," he offered. "No drama, just burgers and the kids. We'd love for you to come. Your parents aren't invited." I hesitated. The instinct to isolate, to protect myself from anyone sharing that DNA, was strong. But I realized that punishing the bystanders was what Rowan and Victoria would do. "I'd like that," I said. I hung up the phone and looked around my house. It was mine. Every brick, every beam, every piece of furniture was paid for by my work, my sacrifice, my resilience. I had been raised to be a support beam for a crumbling structure. But I had walked away, and while they collapsed, I was still standing. I wasn't the golden child. I was something better. I was free.